This week, Steve and I are doing a book haul. I'm Paul.
I'm Steve.
And welcome to another episode of Check Your Shelf. This week, we're going to do a book haul. For like the past 2 or 3 months, we've been buying books here and there with no real idea of doing a video channel. And then we started doing a video channel. I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's go back and grab some of the books that we've bought over the past, couple of months and show you people what we found. I'll go first. I'm going to start with my cheat, at least what I call a cheat. I don't normally buy books through the mail. I like to buy them in stores, but as this town has one used bookstore and they focus on a lot of stuff I don't read, I have to go like to Goodwill and stuff. But I came across this one on one of the booktuber channels that I watch, and I looked it up on eBay, not Amazon, but eBay, and I found this. This is volume 1. Yeah, there you go. Volume 1 of the best of Robert E. Howard, which came out in 2007. It's basically there's a whole bunch. There's 2 best ofs, and they're chock full of some of these are the first time you can actually read these stories as written, because with a lot of Robert E. Howard stuff, especially in the 70s, they were pastiches. They were the editor, who I may talk about because I've got one of his books. The editor would go in and change it as he sees fit or saw fit. But the best of Robert E. Howard covers everything, because this man was unarguably the greatest pulp writer of all time. One day I want to do a show about him and kind of discuss him a little bit, but he covered everything. Everything from, well, he invented sword and sorcery, fiction. Conan being the one everybody knows. He did everything from sword and sorcery to swashbuckling pirates to like boxing stories, Western stories, funny Western stories, horror. He was a working writer, and he was really prolific. This book is really cool because it's illustrated, which is one of my biggest bones of contention with any books nowadays. And it's illustrated. I don't know how well I can show one of these off, but it's illustrated in a style that some people didn't like. Is like, I'll see if I can get a good view of it here. He wrote these stories in like the late 20s and early 30s. So the illustrator went in and made them look like movie posters of the day, So it's very indicative and very fitting. But this one, one thing and I'll be done. This one has The Gray God Passes, which is probably one of my favorite non-Conan stories. The Gray God Passes is a fantasy version of when the Irish basically kicked the Vikings out of Ireland. And it's only like 20 pages, but the damn thing should be a novel. That's how good this guy was.
It's like he's the original St. Patrick.
Probably.
So I have 2 groups of books today. 3 are a recent trip to half-price books. So I have not done enough trips to used bookstores, and because of work, we're doing a workshop, and I needed to get a copy of a book, which I also have here. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'll start with it. I needed a copy of the book, and the last thing I wanted to do was give Jeff Bezos more money, because he doesn't need any more money. So I didn't want to order it from Amazon, even though it was for work. Like work was going to pay for it.
Right.
So I went to Half Price Books, and it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's a good book for what we're using it for. Mm-hmm. It's businessy. It's how to fix issues with your team and build a team that works together and accomplishes things together without a ton of stress. But one of the reasons I chose this book for the book haul is this moment of ASMR.
Yeah, because
could just, for those of you that like ASMR, wait, for those of you that like ASMR, you could just put this on a loop. Here we go. You ready?
Oof. Oh man, I don't smoke, but I need a cigarette.
It also came with this dust jacket, which I know you don't like dust jackets. The way I use dust jackets is as I'm reading it, I'll take this and it'll be my bookmark. And that's how I keep my place. If I'm on this page, I'll use this side. And if I'm on this page, I'll do this. Okay, but in this case, I'm finished with the book. Okay, so this is the one. This is the one that got me back into reading physical books, actually. So, it's a business book, doing it for work. It's how to build great teams. But I would get up in the morning. We've talked about on a previous episode how reading physical books gets harder as your eyesight gets worse.
Yes.
Because you need better light.
You could be sitting on the sun.
Yeah,
is it getting dark in here?
Exactly. And so this one, I sit on my sofa next to the eastern facing window in the morning between while my kids get ready for school, between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. I just sit there and read this book, and I'm like, that was my newspaper reading spot, because in the past several months I started subscribing to a newspaper, as I call it, taking the paper. And so now I've been reading this, and it's been great. I'm going to do it. Now that I'm done with this one, I'm going to keep doing that because it's cool. But anyway, the author is Patrick Lencioni, and the best way I think to use this book is to make sure your whole team's reading it. Because if you try, unless you're the team leader, let's say you have authority and autonomy to do whatever you want with your team, you could use the concepts in this book, but you're going to want the whole team to read it. So, and you can pick it up at Half Price Books. And I got a couple other books while I was there, which I'll do when it's my turn again.
Awesome. It's not the dust jackets that I don't like. It's the library shit when you buy them and they got the really super high reflective. Yeah. Now I would have taken this one off by now, but because it's really easy to do. I would have taken this one off by now, but this one is no longer mine. I borrowed it back for the video. I bought.
So you mean the part that's like the lampshade cover?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Take the lampshade cover off, folks, and the plastic on the sofa. Take it off. This is not part of my book haul, but I just happen to have it handy. So.
And if you're lucky enough to have the library editions that have the library cards in the back, those come out a little more difficult.
This one's the property of Ward County Public Library, and it does not have that.
This is I'll get to the whole story in a minute, but this is like a young adult reader, so it's from an old library with a library card. But what I do is, like, anytime my girl and I go out and about, I try to find every Goodwill that's in this area, that's in the area where we are, because it's usually a lost cause. They almost never have anything. And recently we were in Plymouth, and there's a Goodwill, an Ollie's, a Salvation Army, and these two really cool antique shops, all and a really good Chinese buffet, all in the same area. And I went into the Goodwill not expecting anything, and they had so many books that were they weren't really my thing. A lot of science fiction and fantasy that weren't really my thing, but I'm just impressed to see that much of it, in one spot. Well, in this case, I found two books that I gave to I got them for Mark from the Return of the Son of the Show. The first one is it's John Bellairs, who wrote a lot of young adult fiction back in the day. This is The Mansion in the Mist, which is a horror fantasy mystery series. And this was I think one of the last ones he wrote before he died. Again, it's illustrated. It has a really awesome Edward Gorey image on the inside of it and on the back, which really can't. There you go. There you go. Uh, he was so successful and so prolific as a young adult writer that apparently, according to his wife, he had like a typewriter in every corner of the house,
Nice.
and he had all these books going at the same time. But the thing
He's
is,
like one of those chess champions that run around and play 15 people at chess at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
It was a dark and stormy night. Once upon a time.
and the secret is you make all your characters kind of the same. But
all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
That's right. Well, before he started writing these young adult books, he wrote one of the most unique. I got this. This is not part of the haul. I want to do a video on this one day, but I think I want you to read it before we talk about it. But he wrote one of the most unique fantasy books of all time, The Face and the Frost. It's just this little bitty book. He wrote it, I think, in 68 or 69. It is if he was American, I think he might have been from Michigan, but he wrote like an English writer. He's got that quirky sense that I just absolutely love. But I want to do a video on The Face and the Frost one of these days. But I just wanted to show that off. But yeah, so I found this and another one, but I'll get to that other one on the next one.
The next one I got from Half Price Books. Again, here's those of you that just want the ASMR, you just look for the timestamps and just I'm gonna take the sticker off.
Yeah, see, I bullied you into taking off one sticker, and now you gotta take off all of them.
I'm thinking of doing a new channel, just an ASMR channel where all I do is peel stickers off of things. Isn't that nice? Maybe in the next episode I'll do Goodwill stickers. Those are much harder to get off. Many of you probably know. Okay, this is Alexander Solzhenitsyn. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And my friend Mark, who passed away about 12 years ago,
it's hard to believe.
Studied Russian, and I was in New York with him one day, and with him and my wife, and we were just sitting around a bookstore, and I said, I want to buy a book. I don't know what I want to buy. I need to read something. And he goes, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I was like, I thought it was Ivan Denisovich.
There you go again.
And he goes, no, it's Ivan Denisovich. I was like, okay, well, you study Russian, so I trust you on that. Are you sure it's not Solzhenitsyn? But anyway, this is a book of survival. Unfortunately, this could become very relevant, so I'm going to reread it. I was at the store buying this. I hadn't been to Half Price Book in years, and I didn't even expect to find this there, but I found it. I was like, while I'm here, and there was tons of other people there, I was like, I'm just going to keep wandering. By the way, I know we're going to do Tolstoy, so I'm going to go look for some Tolstoy. And while I was looking for Tolstoy, the S's are close to the T's. So Solzhenitsyn was close to Tolstoy.
Nice.
And I lost my copy of this. So when I was in New York 25 years ago with Mark and my wife, he said, buy this. So I went and bought it and read it. And I read this book around the same time I read a book called Adrift, which is a book about a dude. This is a true story about a guy that was in a sailboat race around off the west coast of Europe, and it was just doing a race there, like from the west coast of Europe up to Great Britain or something is what it was supposed to be. But he got caught in a storm and drifted across the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Caribbean and was rescued. And another book of survival. And for some reason, during that period of my life, everything was going fine during that period of my life. As fine as it goes.
For some reason.
But I was reading all these books about survival and making it through the odds, right? So I'm going to reread this because, this is a dude who, Solzhenitsyn was in, for those of you that don't know, during the Cold War, Solzhenitsyn was imprisoned. He was a writer who wrote negatively about the Stalin regime. So the
That'll do it.
powers that be put him in the what they called the Gulag, which is basically the Gulag Archipelago is probably one of his most famous works.
Oh, that's who wrote that?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But it's like War and Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Gulag
I know.
Archipelago. If you don't, when you want to talk about something being long and big, you either say War and Peace or Gulag Archipelago. You know, just depending on whether you want Tolstoy or Solzhenitsyn.
Mm-hmm.
But the Gulag Archipelago is like a metaphor of there were these series of gulags, and a gulag is a prison that was in Siberia. So they would round up political prisoners and put them up in Siberia and make them work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like forced labor camps.
Yeah.
They were so bad that one of the punishments, if it wasn't so bad, maybe you weren't a political prisoner, but maybe you were in the military or a police force and you had trouble with discipline or whatever, they would send you there to be a guard. That's how bad it was. It was horrible conditions. Even the guards had it bad. This is one day. He wakes up in the morning, goes out to work, you know, has whatever nutrition they give him, and all the way through to bedtime. He wrote this while he was in a gulag, but they don't give you anything to write with or write on. So he had to actually memorize what he wrote.
Oh, geez.
So he basically wrote it in his head. And when he finally got out and he escaped, or I don't know his whole story, Solzhenitsyn, when he finally got out and got to safety, you know, he put pen to paper.
Yeah. See, never again am I gonna take any flack for or feel any criticism for being told that I let stories percolate too long. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I actually write them. I'll move on to my next one then. Okay. Along with the Bellairs book, I also found Unicorn Variations by Roger Zelazny. It's a book of short stories. Zelazny is most famous for his Amber series, which is this cool fantasy sci-fi where like the Amber is the only real world. Everything else is like shadows of it, and you can move in and out of it, and they're basically like gods and stuff. It's a pretty cool story. I've read the first two. Mark has read all of them, and I saw this, and I'm like, well, you know, I love short stories, so I figured I bought it for him, and eventually I'll probably crack it open and take a look at it.
Speaking of half-price books, and speaking of Tolstoy, and speaking of short stories and anthologies,
the man, the myth, the legend.
If you follow our channel and you saw, I think, the most recent episode, actually.
Yeah.
You'd be familiar with this one. This is Tolstoy Selected Stories. I ran across it at Half Price Books when I went to get that other book. And I got it because I couldn't find just, because we were doing the episode. I had read it on Kindle. We were doing the episode on the death of Ivan Ilyich. And I read it on Kindle, and I wanted a physical book to hold during the thing. But they didn't have just that. But bonus, here's a whole list. It's just a whole bunch. It's got God Sees the Truth But Waits, A Prisoner of the Caucasus, What Men Live By, and a whole bunch of others that I plan to read because I liked the death of Ivan Ilyich so much that I'm like, I've heard a lot about Tolstoy, never really read any Tolstoy. So it's like eating an apple. You know, when you eat an apple, you're just sitting there going, I was hungry for something. And I was going to eat a bagel, but instead of a bagel, I ate an apple. And boy, do I feel good about myself for eating that apple.
Yeah,
that's how I feel when I read like Tolstoy.
Yeah, but like no Family of the Vordelak though.
No, right. Plus, I could work on my Russian pronunciation. I'll just open to a random page here. Oh, that wasn't random enough. Oh, there's somebody named Simon the Soldier. Oh, and there's another Ivan. Ivan must be like Joe in Russian.
Yeah, probably.
There's a lot of Ivans.
Ivan, anyway, if there's any Ivans out there, let us know if that's true.
The reason Tolstoy holds up, he wrote in the mid to late 1800s. And I think the reason he holds up is the same reason Steinbeck holds up. You know, he's writing about some fundamentals of human nature, whether they're ingrained, which the older I get, the less I believe that it's in our DNA and in our nature as much as it is our society.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, so a lot of what we call human nature is developed and socialized because of the forms of society that we've built and cultures and stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
people like Tolstoy really have a keen view of that and they get to the heart of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so when when he wrote something, it wasn't like, well, you kind of have to understand Tsarist Russia, the empire, and you kind of have to
Yeah.
understand what it was like to be a bureaucrat in those days. And, it's just not going to translate to today. It's like, no, like you could have written this story today. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, and I didn't look into this, but I'll bet you somebody must have done a movie or a short film or something.
Yeah,
And
probably.
I sometimes like the ones that modernize it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that. Maybe I'll write a script for a play.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
then
death of
go to
Ivan
your local
Ilyich.
theater. Say, hey.
Yeah, I'll call my local theater. I'll play Ivan Ilyich. The problem is, I take that back. It wouldn't work because unless you did like a one-man play, I saw an Emily
Oh.
Dickinson one person, one actor play one time, and that worked because it was like
Mm-hmm.
her just giving her thoughts on stuff and like, oh, this happened today, and here's what I think. That might work, but
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly in his head. Most of what is in this book are in that story is in his head.
Okay, so I lucked out. I know I've said how Goodwill never has anything. I mean, they have like, you know, dead racist grandpa books and chain smoking grandma smut and cookbooks, but like they seldom have what I want. Well, I found this. This is the Fantasy Hall of Fame Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America,
Mm,
and I was like shocked. This is a pretty bold title, right?
and long.
This came out I don't know. Let's see if I can find it here. Um this came out in 1998, and like I ran down the giant list of people who are in this thing. First of all, it's edited by Silverberg. He's in there. C.L. Moore's in here. Ray Bradbury. You can't do an anthology series of anything, even a cookbook, without a Ray Bradbury story. Shirley Jackson, Herr Heinlein is in here. Um, uh, Jack Vance. There would be no D&D without Jack Vance. I'm just gonna say that right now. Robert Bloch, who wrote more than Psycho. There's tons of people in here. Philip K. Dick, who wrote, you may know him from The Man in the High Castle and the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or whatever that. Which, by the way, don't read The Man in the High Castle after watching the show, expecting the two to be even close to each other.
I can confirm.
Yeah,
I tried
the
that.
best parts of the series aren't in the book. So, I love short stories because short stories are something I can just read sitting there in the morning, like what you were saying, or just when I get done with I call it a project hangover, where I work on something forever, and then when it's done, I have no brain juice, so
Yeah.
I kind of just float. So short stories are good palate cleansers for that.
Now,
Yeah.
since I just did a story for which we did an episode, my next one will be another book for which we did an episode.
Okay.
If you and you were just talking about fantasy and
Hmm.
science fiction, if you like fantasy and science fiction and have not heard of H.P. Lovecraft, pause the video right now and go examine your life.
Really think it over. Yes.
At the Mountains of Madness, which won the 1937 award for best books that begin with the word at.
I can confirm.
Yeah. At the Mountains of Madness was sent to me by my bestie, who's sitting across from me. Printed, made in the USA, Moni, Illinois, on 19 December 2024.
Mm-hmm.
This book
Mm-hmm.
was I'm ashamed to say, and I realize I need to examine my life choices. I'm ashamed to say this is the first H.P. Lovecraft I ever read. of course I heard of Cthulhu and I heard of H.P. Lovecraft, and I knew he's in the zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
I tried to read it before, but I just couldn't get through.
Yeah.
I don't know what I picked to try to read, but this thing, Paul knew that I dig a good survival story,
Yeah.
and he knew that I loved it. Oh, I read Endurance around the same time I
Yeah.
read Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich and Adrift, the two survival stories. I read Endurance around that same time, which is a story of survival. And I was like, what is it with me and all these survival books? But that one stuck with me, and it was about a polar expedition at the South Pole. And so At the Mountains of Madness starting out as a polar expedition at the South Pole, like it just starts out that way. And it doesn't gloss over the details. It
No.
talks about the technology and the storage and the stores and the personnel on the ship and the ports of call that they had to go to get the expedition ready. And the first part of the book reads just like if you could be reading Endurance.
Yeah.
Before wackiness ensues.
That's why I sent it to you, because I knew if you could get through that first part, you'd be hooked into the second part. And I knew the first part would appeal to everything you love.
Yes, it did. It really did. And then the middle part was good, and the end part was also good. So At the Mountains of Madness. If you've ever had trouble getting into H.P. Lovecraft, I do recommend picking this up. It's apparently very inexpensive. It's in the public domain, so you can just, there are very inexpensive copies out there. The Kindle version, I downloaded the Kindle version for 50 cents, I think. And I also listened to a really great audio version of it. So if you're like, I've always wanted to get into Lovecraft, I don't know where to start, I'd start. It's one of his last books, but I would start at the end like I always do. I recommend starting at the end in almost anything.
It's the longest thing he ever wrote, and it didn't see print until after he was dead. That copy that I sent you is the reason why I created this copy.
Ah, nice.
Because I bought it for cheap. I knew it was going to be kind of thrown together because I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it and have you already have a copy of it, because, like I said, it appeals to what you like. Well, then when you showed it to me, I'm like, ooh. And then I remembered, oh, wait a minute. I started working on this about 2 years ago and got distracted by life. And when that copy showed up, I'm like, all right, I'm going to finish this. I have a major gripe with how book companies don't put illustrations in their novels anymore. I don't know why they don't do it anymore, but I thought I wanted to make a nice copy of this book that and illustrate it, because I am an artist. So I got this is when they find the quote unquote fossils.
Beautiful.
I am in I'm waiting for my proof copy to show up.
Yeah.
When it gets here, if I'm satisfied with it, it'll be up for sale. It'll be print on demand, and this copy alone is really good. It's just there were some errors in it. I think it's your turn.
Oh,
wait, it's my turn, because I was just pimping myself.
I didn't realize your turn was you pimping yourself.
No. Speaking of illustrations, and speaking of Goodwill, I poo-poo all over Goodwill, and then I found this at Goodwill and that at Goodwill. But believe me, we go to Goodwill's about every other weekend, and that's probably wrong. It's probably more like every weekend. We find one, and that's where we end up. I found this. This is the 1976 edition of the King Kong novel, which the cool thing about the King Kong novel, now I haven't read it. I always wanted to. I found this, and it's got 16 illustrations, and they're immaculate, but I don't know if they'll show up on camera or not. Let's see if I can find one here. Like here's what they thought dinosaurs looked like in 1932.
That's what I thought dinosaurs looked like in 1972.
Well, it's because our books at the library were from 1932.
That's true.
Anyway, the cool thing about King Kong is, how Arthur C. Clarke worked hand in hand to create 2001 with Stanley Kubrick. That's basically what happened in 31 and 32 between Edgar Wallace and Delios W. Lovelace, which sounds like a porn name.
Hmm.
They wanted to kind of cross promote this thing because 32, there was no television. They had to promote it any way they could. So putting out a novelization of it just seemed like a good idea. And it has fallen into the public domain. This version of it has. So you can do with it what you want for anybody out there who likes to dabble in the public domain. Like, hello.
Careful, if you're going to be out there dabbling in the public domain, you might just.
But I want to.
Don't carry an ID. Don't take your phone with you.
Right.
And wear a mask.
Right. I want to read this book and do a video on it because I love King Kong and all of its iterations. Specifically, the one from the 70s. That movie is fantastic. I don't care what anybody says. We just did a show about it over on Return of the Son of the Show. I'll link it down below.
Everybody has their King Kong. That was our King Kong.
Yeah, and it still holds up.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about this next one. I confess I haven't read it. It's called This is Strategy by Seth Godin. And he's a marketing expert, and he used a really effective marketing technique, which I suppose you could call it a technique, but his philosophy of marketing is you don't use techniques. Yes, you have tactics. Yes, you have methods and approaches, but you're not trying to trick somebody into buying something, right? Mm-hmm. And what he did is he does workshops too. So he said, anybody who buys 2 copies of my book, This is Strategy, gets a free seat in an upcoming workshop. So I bought this and the audio version, and I haven't finished either one. And I had a seat reserved in a workshop and I missed it. Oh. But I bought the books, which, it was coincidentally, I was working on our 5-year strategy for work, and it was good timing. I've flipped through it and I've used some of the way he writes books. It's not linear. It's like you can turn to any page and see paying it forward versus paying it back. Paying it back is trading favors. Reciprocity is a natural human instinct amplified by culture. If someone does a nice thing for you, you're inclined to do a nice thing in return. Paying it forward means offering something to someone who can do nothing for you in return. And that's an act of feeding the culture. And it's not a matter of what you'll get back today. It simply creates the conditions for the culture to pass it on. And his whole philosophy is good ideas spread. So the way you know whether an idea is good or not is it spreads. And that doesn't mean if you buy 1 million Facebook ads or spend millions of dollars on Facebook ads or whatever, and that idea spreads, that means it was a good idea. Because the minute you stop spending the money on the Facebook ads, the idea kind of goes away, right?
Yeah.
It's good ideas that spread. And that's his whole philosophy. And his philosophy is based on define the change you want to make in the world, tell stories about it, develop culture around it, develop community around that change. And if it's a good idea, it'll spread. If it doesn't spread, that's evidence that it was probably a bad idea or you just didn't work hard enough on it.
Right, right.
So that's what this one is. Anybody who has listened to me say more than 5 words has heard me mention Seth Godin. And I always like to say what's that?
Can confirm.
Can confirm. And I like to say my friend Seth Godin says.
Yeah.
So
yes, all the time.
I'm a big fan. I've adopted a lot of his philosophies in my work life. So I bought this and it was delivered via the United States Postal Service.
While we still have it.
Yeah. While we still have it. Exactly.
I've got one more. Again, that one Goodwill haul, man, I'm telling you what.
Nice.
I've never seen a copy of Flashing Swords in the wild. I always see them like on eBay and stuff like that. And this is number 4. I don't know how many were printed in all. One of the things the reason why I brought this up is earlier when I talked about the guy who would basically go in and butcher the Robert E. Howard stories. It's this guy right here. Now, Lynn Carter, okay, Lynn Carter was a great editor. He knew what good stories were. So any chance he got that he could put an anthology together, he would shoehorn one of his stories into the like, oh, I'm good too. Look at me. Um, but like I said, he's a great editor, storyteller, not so much. This one is pretty cool. This one came out like in the 70s, I think was when this series came out. Yeah, 1977. The year that young Paul went from being a boy to a man.
9 years old.
Yeah, Star Wars came out that year, man.
Oh, got it.
We went into that theater boys and we came out men. My brother was a man at 7.
What was going on in those theaters? Jeez.
Anyway, it's a short collection. It's not a very big book at all, and it is illustrated. I might show one of the illustrations, but this one has a story by Jack Vance again. No D&D without Jack Vance. Paul Anderson, John Jakes, who I don't know if you remember, like in junior high and high school, everybody was reading like The Bastard. It was this big. Yeah. Before he wrote those historical whatever they were, he wrote a crap ton of like weird fantasy, and they're pretty good too. And then there's a Michael Moorcock story in here. Moorcock is famous for creating Elric. One of the most unusual, brooding, existential fantasy characters ever created. But this is a good series, though. Well, if this book is any indication of the rest of the series, it's a good collection. Let's see if I can find one of the drawings for you, real quick. I mean, they're weird. Like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on in this picture, but like, dude's you're getting a buffalo shot there or something.
Buffalo shot.
But it has this really cool psychedelic cover on it. Let's see if I can put it in front of the.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
All right, my last one also came through the mail, and it is by one of my favorite authors. You'll recognize the author right away. There we go. It's Jason Pargin.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to check him out. I love his TikToks.
And this one, that's hilarious. This one's called "Zoe is Too Drunk for This Dystopia." And one of the reasons I really wanted to show everybody is this: if you're like one of the first 1,000 or so people that order through it's a local bookstore. I think it's local to him. It's called Parnassus Books in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you order it through them, he will sign it.
Nice.
So it's nice to get. Just imagine signing 1,000 books. Holy moly!
I'll take that challenge.
Yeah, me too. So Jason Pargin, as Paul mentioned, I heard an interview with him on a podcast recently, and he said the wildest thing has happened. He's like, most people now know me as a TikToker who writes books.
Yeah.
And he's like, it is the strangest thing because he only became famous he became TikTok famous sometime in the last few years.
Mm-hmm. I've been watching him for about 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
His career started as, a writer, probably one of those, in an alternate universe, in a different life, I could have seen my career. Like if I had known how much I like to write, if I'd taken this path, and it was basically creating content for the web, Yeah. And then he kind of worked his way up to be the editor of Cracked.com.
That was your jam.
Cracked was my jam when I was a kid. I always liked the runner-up thing.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
I liked
the underdog.
The underdog. Instead of Mad Magazine, I was a Cracked fan. Instead of Coke or Pepsi, I was an RC fan, right? Or if I had to choose between Coke and Pepsi, I'd choose Pepsi, right? I was always what's the runner-up, right? Who's the underdog? So I liked Cracked magazine, and then of course it became Cracked.com. So he was one of the editors. Mm-hmm. And then in the early days of Amazon recommendations, I read this book called Help a Bear is Eating Me, because it was recommended by one of my friends. And then when I got done with it on my Kindle, it said, you might also like, and it was this book called John Dies at the End. And I was like, the title alone Like
Yeah.
spoiling spoiling the whole book with the title.
Yeah.
I love. And it was by David Wong.
Yeah.
And so I read it, and then I read the next one. There was a sequel, and then this book is full of spiders. Don't touch it, whatever you do,
Yeah.
or something like that. But anyway, it's way quirky, it's like uh, horror, sort of near future ish. Not really science fiction, but fantasy ish and horror. And it just super quirky, and I loved it. And then I found out David Wong wasn't the person's name. The person's name was Jason Pargin. He picked David Wong because Wong is the most common name, I think, in the world. Because
I wondered about that.
it's like the Smith of China.
Yeah.
So he just did it kind of as a joke, but when you know better, you do better, And
Yeah,
so
and he
instead
did.
of appropriating that culture, he's like, no, I'll go by Jason Pargin. And then he started this series about Zoe. The first one was called Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. And it's about the near future where there's like biomechanical people are enhancements that you can use to be more powerful and futuristic weapons and stuff. But it's like near future. It's like 30 years from now and not 300 years from now.
Yeah.
And Zoe's this she doesn't want any part of it, but her deadbeat dad, who left her to grow up in a trailer park, turns out to be this huge kingpin with millions and millions of dollars. He dies suddenly and leaves it all to her, along with control of the empire. And this is the sequel, Zoe's Too Drunk for This Dystopia. So
awesome. Oh, mine are all over the place. So.
There you go. That's it. That was my haul.
All right. Well, we've taken enough of your time today. We're going to do another one of these book hauls in a couple of months when I've hit more Goodwill, apparently.
It's like Yogi Berra said, Goodwill never has any good books because too many people go there and buy them all up.
I believe it was him. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm Paul.
I'm Steve.
And next time you're looking for something to read,
check your shelf. What do you mean, you people?